All right, here with Lance Zierlein, the guy that writes how many scouting profiles?
500 a year.
500.
And if there's anyone that gets drafted I don't have a profile on, I have to write them after the draft.
Oh man, so it never ends. It never ends.
No. Author of up to this point over 2,400 over the last 4.5 years.
Great, and we like to peruse them, and I see you have some unique scouting terms in there as well. So how do you keep it fresh for 500 per year?
That's an interesting question that you ask, because the first year it's easy. It's all brand new.
Right.
The second year, I recognize being redundant, and so right. I want to. I can tell you, I've got thesaurus and power thesaurus up on the bookmarks tab.
Okay, because it feels like that sometimes, and I just wanted to confirm that. That's good.
Yeah, but I also have words. Like, there are different ways to say can't do something.
Sure.
And so I mix it up because I want my draft profiles, it used to be in paragraph form, and now they've gone to bullet points. They wanted to go to bullet points. So it becomes, when it's bullet point style, it's easier to have redundancy of terminology and basic words and simple words. So I try to avoid that as best I can. And sometimes I come up with new terminology and phraseology. I really did that the first 2 or 3 years. Once you get to year 4 and now year 5, it's just about getting through it. Like the flowering language, I save for really, for Ed Oliver and for guys that really pop. Yeah. But it's really a battle of painting a picture. I had Jerry Angelo once tell me, just say what you see. Yeah. You got to say what you see. But I come from the background of radio. For 21 years I've been in radio and doing content production and writing at the same time. I've done writing for a good portion of that. And so I recognize that through the radio stuff, as a storyteller, it's important that when you have a certain feeling about a player, you want to be able to find ways to get that out that can be impactful to the reader. Right. And so I do take time to do that. There have been times I wanted to do it in a negative way, and now I try to hold back, because I know these players read these and they get upset about positive things. Like, I can have a positive review on a player, but because I have any weaknesses at all, nobody has weaknesses. Come on. No, thankfully all these second, third, and fourth rounders who I say good things about, they're upset that there's any weaknesses at all. So it can get. I'm working right now 70 hours a week leading up to the draft between radio and my radio show and this, and so it can get a little monotonous. So you do need to break it up with phraseology. Yeah, so that's funny, because we've done, we're mostly data driven, but we've done some scouting reports, and I realized, I'm self-aware, I think, enough to see that, but it's a challenge to kind of mix it up. So one of the things we focus on so much here at PFF is we grade every single player on every play, pure production grade. We're not looking at technique. Did you make the block? Did you not? And we feel like it spits out some data that has use moving forward. And we always say, hey, look, the advantage is we get to quantify every snap. It's film-based. We got football guys doing it, and they're quantifying it. But then, a lot of people don't know you have football guys doing it. Yeah. So look, we are always. And people that listen to the podcast are like, hey, you guys got to stop telling us how good you are, because a lot of it's we feel like we have to prove ourselves. Right. But then there's people that still don't understand who is doing the grading. No, and I get the sense, I find it interesting to watch and listen, because I know that sometimes the grading thing, I've sat in with my dad and watched him grade tape after a Steelers game when he was coaching with the Steelers, and it just blew my mind that how the grading works. And I think from coach to coach it can vary. Right. And especially for certain position, it can be harder than others to determine whether it's a plus, a minus, or kind of a neutral grade, and how coaches do it. So I think that's one of the reasons you guys get pushback and blowback on grades. But I do sense that there is a defensiveness, because you guys don't feel like people give you a fair shake on who is grading or how everything works. Because the thought is, well, you got guys who are in their basement who are just guessing off a TV tape.
They might be in their basement, but we got former coaches and we have former NFL players in there and stuff, or guys that are trained up.
But a lot of people don't know that.
Right. So yeah, we do try to convey that message. So I think the fun part about this is every coach does see it differently. I would say our advantage is, all right, we're going to try to look at the league through the same eyes. So my point is, we have this massive amount of data that even if there were mistakes along the way, if we could say this data points to this at the next level, there's some use there. So now then balancing that between what your eyes see in the scouting community. So have you thought about tapping into any of that and saying, okay, I'm doing this from a scouting standpoint. Do I need to at least make a portion of my evaluations data-driven or stat-driven or whatever other components are?
I have since 2014.
Yeah.
Every analysis that I do, from when I used Xinfo data previously with stats, and now this is my first year looking at PFF data, every analysis I do, I research the person, and I try to get a personality profile.
Right.
What sports did they play? I read articles, because sometimes coaches will tell you something, and sometimes their non-comments will also tell you something. I'll watch YouTube videos. I'll go take a look at a player's social media page whenever I get a chance. Whether I use that or not, it gives me a background.
Part of their resume, right?
It is, and a lot of them don't seem to know that.
Right.
But then I've always looked at the data. I've always looked at the data because what it does for me is you have to watch film, you have to watch tape to get an idea for certain factors. But what data does for me is it shortcuts the process to where if a guy has a lot of drops or a low number of drops, I mean, that tells me right there a lot about I need to go find out why he doesn't catch it well, or I need to go find out why Sterling Shepard is so good at catching a football. What is it that makes him stand out? So for me, data provides me, if there are outliers, pro or con for a player, it alerts me to them quickly. Right. And so I've always used data for my profiles. Looking at completion percentage against cornerbacks. Sometimes it's very fruitful, sometimes not as much.
Yeah, there's 10 overthrows and it's
you
not telling the whole story.
Like Central Michigan cornerbacks, from the first year I did it, where there was a ton of ball production for a Central Michigan cornerback, and he ended up not being a player. And then Xavier Crawford and Sean Bunting have a bunch of production. And so you have to go back, and certain times you have coaches who they teach their corners to really squat on routes and really play everything underneath. And if you get beat over the top, we'll live with it. So that's what tape does. Right. It sometimes will dispel some of the data, but at other times, Tre'Davious White had this unbelievable completion percentage against, unbelievably low.
Right.
His sophomore year, I want to say, and that's what brought him to my attention headed into his junior season. Or maybe it was his junior season headed into his senior season.
He was really good as a sophomore, struggled as a junior, was really good again as a senior.
That's what it was, yeah. And so I find that stuff, when I see something high or something low, I try to find out why was he high or low. Was it actual coverage? And a lot of times, face-up press corners are going to have a lower completion percentage against, but can they, like David Long, but is it translatable? So I have to go figure out if it's translatable.
Michigan corners every year seem to have a really low completion percentage against. From Jordan Lewis, we've seen it.
Good rushers.
Stribling a couple years ago. So yeah, you've got pass rush. And then, they're grabby a little bit. I feel like they get away with some stuff down the field.
You can murder in college and they don't call it. You've watched the tape. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Xavier Rhodes from Baylor, whenever he came in, he had a lot of pass interference penalties, but he had a lot that weren't called.
Right.
I don't know that people truly realize how brutal cornerbacks get to treat wide receivers in college, and how that paradigm shift, when it flips to the league.
I always struggle the balance between a guy that's grabbing a guy because he's beat versus a guy that just knows the college rules and knows I could take advantage of it. So that's always fascinating. So you tweeted the other day, you're giving this analogy, right, about the ingredients that go into a player. Do you want to sum that up quickly?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I'm big into traits, into physical traits. I've learned under Chris Ballard and some Jerry Angelo who taught Chris. The Packer stuff with Alonzo Highsmith is a good friend, and then I've studied with different coaches as well. And there are certain things that are more important physically than other things for certain positions. I'm not saying anything that people don't realize, but I always feel like you have to. It's like a cake or lasagna or pizza, whatever you want to use as the phraseology here. There are certain, and I'm really a big foodie, so I'm really big into restaurants. You could take, let's say it's like a TV show, it's Chopped, and you get a basket, and two chefs, one of them makes this unbelievable dish and the other one doesn't, and there's good ingredients in there, but they're kind of mismatched and they're not perfect, but somebody with the right vision, a chef's able to do a lot with it while another chef isn't. Well, that could be traits where a coach gets the most out of their traits. Right. You could have me, they could give me the very best ingredients in the world to bake a cake, but I'm not going to be able to do anything with it. But it doesn't diminish the ingredients. It's just that I wasn't able to get the most out of that cake. Where coaching a lot of times can get more out of the ingredients. Now, it's not a given. It's never a given. But if you don't have those ingredients, you can be a really good college player, but you've got a floor. I mean, you got a ceiling at about the 5th round and an average back up to special teams value. If you have special traits, historically, and this has been proven through data and through historical analysis, the very best players of all time had special traits, generally speaking. Right. So that's why traits, there's so many height, weight, speed guys, GMs in the league now. But a lot of the leagues, as you know, are driven by analytics too. But the physical, I mean, that's analytics too, the physical part.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the fascinating part of the discussion for me. So we have numbers guys that would say, look, if we don't even watch film, let's just run the numbers. We're really, really smart, and we'll say we could get you in the ballpark to guys. So the complete opposite of watching film, let's just use numbers and say, okay, we could get you a 60% hit rate. Let's just make up a number. And then they would say, you know what, the traits, it either shows up on film or it doesn't, right? And of course, yeah, you can manipulate them and, you know, cook differently and all that stuff. So let's use Rashawn Gary versus, say, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, great traits, also had great production from a PFF standpoint, and we've actually found our pass rush stuff translates pretty well to the next level. We haven't had too many guys who didn't produce really well in college produce in the NFL. Rashawn Gary's the guy that's going to blow it up here at the Combine, right?
Yep.
Doesn't have great production. That's like a major red flag for us. So how do you balance that? Because so on one hand, you could say, look, Rashawn Gary, workout numbers look just like Myles Garrett. But then from PFF standpoint, we'd be like, man, Myles Garrett, great grade, dominated. Gary didn't. Red flag. How do you balance those two? Because you can manipulate the numbers any way you want because they're similar in one way and different in another. So
that's a great question, and I feel like football scouting. So I've got a background in some basketball stuff as well. I tried actually. I wrote to the Houston Rockets. I wanted to be a scout back when I was in my mid-20s, and actually Joe Ash reached out to me, and who was head of their scouting department. I'm friends with Dennis Lindsey with the Utah Jazz and Daryl Morey with the Rockets, and so I kind of take a more holistic, I'm kind of unique in the way that I look at things. I'm very analytical by nature where I want to find out, I believe in a process. And for me, the process is historical context, which is the data, which I need that. But then I need to find out, well, let's put the data in context. Specifically to Rashawn Gary, and I'm glad you mentioned this. All the traits in the world. Extremely explosive. When you turn a tape on, now you got all that and he'll test. When you turn a tape on, what you see is a guy who gets off the ball fast but has no instincts as a rusher. He has no rush plan. He doesn't do anything with his hands. And so you've got these great ingredients, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the cake is going to get made right. Can the chef bring out the right balance? Because baking, for example, is about it's about proportions. It's math. It's not a chef can freestyle. A chef is a freestyle battle rap artist. A pastry chef is a mathematician, and everything has to be right. And with Rashawn Gary, you got all these ingredients and all these traits. The problem is, can he translate them through coaching? So what I would say is, the best way for me is to go to a coach and say, what can be coached and what can't? And I used my dad as a great tool for that for offensive linemen. And I said, Dad, this guy does this, and this guy doesn't do this. And so early on, I learned what was coachable and what wasn't. So when I
talked to... That's analytics too.
Yeah.
You're quantifying what historically can be coached or can't.
No, and I'm not, and look, I'm not
defending. I'm just,
no, but people there's a bugaboo. Analytics scares people, or they immediately build up a defense mechanism, and I don't. Analytics is like card counting. It's swinging the odds in your favor is all it is. And so I want to be, I go, but my process, I need to go talk to a defensive back coach and find out what's coachable and what's not. Because they've got years of finding out which traits translate and which don't, what's coachable and what's not. So part of my process is data. I need to find out what things are coachable. And then what I've come to find out is Rashawn Gary is probably going to succeed or fail based on his football character. Is he committed enough to put in the time and the effort to learn? He may never have the instincts as a rusher, but he can learn, just like Josh Allen from last year to this year. You watch tape from last year to this year, you can tell he's learned moves.
For
and
sure.
he's put them, the inside hand chop is a move that he learned. He put it into practical application. I have no problem projecting his ingredients because I know he's already coachable.
Right.
I've already seen the signs. I haven't seen it with Rashawn Gary. He's got his own agency that he's doing now. Is his head really on football? Is he really going to be committed to the process it takes to get better to where football consumes him and he starts to study himself what it takes and he starts to internalize all this coaching and putting everything together so that those traits matter? It isn't an exact science.
That sounds risky.
Rashawn Gary is probably the high floor, low ceiling guy in the draft to me. It's probably him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And real quick on Ed Oliver, pass rush production for us lower than expected.
Yeah.
Same.
But how do you factor the fact that he was on a nose and you basically set him up to be blocked?
No, I know. They got three-man rush, a ton, tight
and you can slide to a nose. Like, they didn't do their best. And Major Applewhite's told me this, their former coach.
Yep.
We didn't do our best to put him in the best position sometime defensively.
Which boggles my mind sometimes. I know you got to do what's best for the team.
Mind-boggling.
But you have a guy that, in that conference could have absolutely
Well, look
dominated.
at how P.J. Hall was used at Sam Houston.
Yeah.
Or is it Stephen F. or Sam Houston? Sam Houston. P.J. Hall, so I went to, his production's off the chart, so I had to go watch the tape and find out, is it real or not? And then what they did for him his senior year is they moved him out wide some and rushed him off the end. They stood him up some. So, what the tape does is it puts in context some of the data for me about how I'm going to use it as I internalize what I think about a player. And I don't mind using data points inside my profiles either.
Sure.
That's not a problem for me because I think that helps paint the picture. And if ultimately we want to paint the picture, we talk about a guy's got great ball production. Well, what kind of ball production? Well, this many passes defensed. He completed, allowed less than 40% of the passes against him completed. That's important for telling a story.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
Great discussion. We can do this for hours, but you have to go. So that's fine. Lance Zierlein, much appreciated. Thanks for being on. Maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.